Hello, everybody. This is Alan Jacobson from Keller Williams Reserve in Palm Beach Gardens with my friends Trip Dunham from Kansas City and Sean Johnston from Montana in Billings, correct?
Correct.
Got to make sure. I hope he's silent.
Yes, I'm up in Billings, Montana.
Okay, cool. Well, we are your real estate guys, and this is our second program. Last week, we talked about overpricing and how to price your home properly. Today, we're going to talk about some mistakes, in particular, three of the numerous mistakes that a number of agents make that you need to look out for so that you can make sure that your home, when being sold and listed, is sold and listed properly. And without being redundant, the first one is overpricing. So, to reiterate some of the things we discussed last week, overpricing will have your home typically sit on the market, and time is the enemy of your home. You want your home to sell quickly, and in order to sell quickly, there needs to be a sense of competition. Well, kind of hard to have competition if it's overpriced because nobody's going to look at it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the other issue is we know that days on market is acid to your price. We actually had this situation come up with one of our buyer's agents that works for our team over the course of the weekend, and they went out to a house that's been on the market since last October. It had been relaunched here just a few weeks ago. However, the previous agent, or I shouldn't say the previous agent, the agent that's listed the home left the former MLS sheets on the countertop that showed information from its previous listing dates. And so immediately that agent looked at it and said, well, it's been on the market for 8 months. We're certainly not going to pay full price for it. And not only did they not want to pay full price, they came in $24,000 below list price. So pricing and days on market as a combination are the key.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to add in there, Alan, is how do people generally know, how do agents know, and how do sellers know if a property is overpriced? What sort of feedback loop do they get? I like to term the word crickets. They don't hear anything a lot of times. In other words, no one's calling and inquiring about the property. No agents are giving feedback that say, I have interest in the property. It's deathly quiet. And that's the feedback that the market is actually talking silently to tell you they're not interested at that price. And I think it's very difficult for consumers, especially because we as agents are in the business. We run into this multiple times, but a consumer typically has a house. And that house, when there's no communication and there's nothing happening, they naturally start thinking that there are other reasons that the house is not selling. And while that could be the case, the majority of the time it's the price.
Yeah, there's really only three reasons a house doesn't sell, right? It's either not priced appropriately, your marketing isn't appropriate, or there's just not a buyer in the market for that property. The not having a buyer in the market for that property, possible with particular types of property. We had a property this last year that was, a multi-million-dollar property, limited marketplace for that particular type of a property. And so you may just be in a market where there's not somebody to buy that property. But generally speaking, it's either going to be price or marketing. And rarely, if you have a good agent, we're going to talk about that in just a second, and you're properly presenting the property / the product on the market, then marketing shouldn't be the problem either. Although we're going to look at some ideas of how that may be the problem, depending on how it's being presented. So,
Yeah, I'd like to say to everyone that this program that we've put together, which we are doing on a weekly basis, our purpose is to show you some of the wonderful things that go on in the real estate industry, how to get the most out of the sale of your home, or how for you as a buyer, you can find the right home, carve out the best deal possible for yourself, but show you all things and talk to you about all things real estate. And you'll find, I think, that hearing from the three of us, one in Montana, one in Kansas City, Missouri, and me in Palm Beach Gardens area, Palm Beach County, Florida, that things really aren't that different. And I think that's one of the big takeaways you'll get from this. So that's what I wanted to just kind of add right now.
How about we jump off from what we were just talking about and talk about photos? I think I'll tell on myself. When I first got into real estate years ago, my understanding of marketing, or my perspective when listing a property, was the more photos, the better. The more I could share with the marketplace about a property, the more likely that somebody would come and take a look at the house. It wasn't until just a few years ago that I realized that that was actually not accurate. I had a client who was looking for a home, U.S. District Court judge, so not an unsophisticated buyer. And he was coming in from out of town. We were going to go out and look at a handful of houses. I sent him a list. He was flipping through the homes online and told me, I want to take this house off our list. And I asked him, was there a particular reason that one wasn't something that he was interested in looking at? He actually told me that the reason he didn't want to see that house was because it had a shelving unit next to the front door that made him not want to go see the house. The shelving unit wasn't going to be there after he bought the house. Had nothing to do with the rest of the home, but that one photo was enough for him to say, I don't want to look at that house. Now, the rest of the story is I drove him by the house. He saw the sign, asked about it, and said, hey, how about getting in there? We walked in, and I knew within 2 steps into the house that was the house that he was going to purchase. But one photo was enough to cause him to not want to come and see the home. And so just real quickly, I'm going to share my screen and give you a quick idea of what that looks like. I've got a couple of homes pulled up here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. So when you're looking at photos online, oftentimes, these are all decent photos here.
Can you go back for a second though?
Sure.
Because I'm going to disagree a little bit about one of them, the one with the bed. Okay. That picture, and I can't speak for every consumer, but that picture turns me off.
Okay. And what is
guys
it
know
about that
why?
photo that turns you off?
Do you guys know why?
The wrinkled blanket on the bed?
Number one, I hate blankets on beds. Number two, it's not folded neatly. And subliminally, I internalize it as not neat.
Yes.
And when I illuminate the way a home should look, I want everything to be neat and tidy. Even those drapes look a little bit off to me. So, and I'll take it one step further. Just the angle of this with the door off to the side, just the picture to me is not appealing. And I'm not sure what that is peering through the window.
That's actually an egress window. Those are steps in the concrete. You can see I don't know if you can see my cursor, but that's a step to get out of the window.
Yeah.
But very good point. Let me jump over here in the wrong spot.
Now look the way this bed is made.
Look at this photo.
Oh.
Does that make you want to buy a house? You can't get past the washer dryer to get to the toilet. There's a washer dryer in your bathroom. We want them to get to the house and see the house and then decide, well, okay, we can live with that because the rest of the house is beautiful. But if they see a photo like that, they may not even come see the home. This one had this photo,
Oh, my goodness.
right? Now I might get to the house and be able to look past that, but I may not be able to look past it online.
Well, that's the key. The key is that the pictures, it pretty much 50% of the battle is to get the picture. Now that's an appealing picture, but to get people to want to see a home, they have to look at the pictures and go, wow, that looks like a really nice house. I want to see that. And I always learned in marketing many years ago, less is more, and to titillate the interest of the buyers, regardless of what the industry is. So I would always want to say less or show less and get them to come in. And then my job as a salesperson is to then sell the home.
Correct. So that's really what it comes down to. And what we wanted to really talk about today is what we call fewer, better photos.
Right.
You don't need, like, for instance, in our MLS, we're allowed, I think, 36 photos currently. I used to use all 36. I would figure out a way to make sure that every single photo I could come up with was going to be in there. And this home is a very good example of that. We have what I call throwaway photos. That doesn't tell me anything about the home. It doesn't attract me to want to go see the home. Okay, maybe you want to see the deer, but that again doesn't attract me to see the home.
So
Again,
there's a difference between your market and my market. In my market, I see agents putting up 80 photos,
oh my
100
God.
photos, 60. I'm like, do I really need to see 8 pictures of the pool? Do I
Exactly.
need to see 6 pictures of the kitchen? Show me one good picture. Get me interested.
Exactly. We need it. The photos should be designed or presented, the house presented by a photo in such a way as to create curiosity and a reason to call. In our business, this is our call to action. Most people, in my opinion, don't read the ad copy they write, even though we take a lot of time. It's probably something we should talk about on another one of our get-togethers, but we want to create curiosity. And if we've showed every nook and cranny of the home, we have created no curiosity whatsoever. In fact, what we likely have done is shown you at least one photo that says, oh, I don't like that, so let's go ahead and take that one off the list.
100%.
Sean, I think one other important point about fewer, better photos is human nature. We can't always get what we want, but yet when we can't get it, we desire it more. So the moment that we start introducing 60, 80, 36, whatever the number is, where we play off of volume versus quality, we don't enable that curiosity to kick in. The human nature doesn't even get a chance. And thus, when it doesn't kick in, chances are they'll keep scrolling to the next house, to the next one. And you certainly don't want to miss it over one little thing, like you didn't create some sort of curiosity, to your point, to get them to come to see the house physically. Because let's face it, most buyers, most consumers, and I'm not talking about investors, I'm talking about consumers here, they don't buy a house without looking at it. Now, I know that's changed a bit, but in reality, most people still want to see the house. If they don't come to see the house, they can't get an opportunity to fall in love with it. And it's such an emotional type transaction and emotional sort of experience that you have to make sure that you cater to those human emotions. And I think, to your point, the fewer, better photos is definitely the way to do that.
100%. Yeah.
So maybe we can transition to the last point we were going to talk about today, and that is communication.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that we all have stories um, galore that we could share. But I want to hit the topic first. And I'm going to come at it a little differently, come at it from the buy side. Um, a buyer's agent, and I'll just tell you, having been a buyer's agent and working with buyer's agents, they work really hard. They typically are out spending a lot of hours showing a lot of houses. They're covering a lot of details. Um, but one little mistake I see being made consistently, and not every agent, the stellar agents seem to do this, but the ones that aren't, that miss out, don't call the listing agent once the buyer has expressed interest in making an offer. Instead, they will naturally go the technological route and write up an offer or text over an offer, something that's more electronic. But remember, once again, this is a very personal sort of experience for not only the consumers, but the agents as well. So I find that a best practice that works a lot is if I have a buyer that wants to make an offer on a house, the first thing that I, as the agent, do is call the listing agent to find out what's important, not only to the seller, but to the listing agent as well. And don't think that when there's 5 or 10 offers, that if you were one or the only or one of two that call that agent, with all things being equal, you've increased the probability that you might get the nod simply because you are a better communicator. And I feel like that's kind of a lost art. I think it got more prominent in COVID, where and technology has advanced so much with texting and emailing and instant messaging that it's a natural tendency for us as humans to be more efficient, but yet sometimes to our own peril, we compromise that relationship that is important in actually getting a transaction, closing a transaction, or getting a deal to closing. Flip over on the listing side. The listings agent, I feel like that our industry has kind of grown up in this over the decades of leaving all of the activity to the buyer or the buyer's agent. And so our job as listing agents is to proactively sell the house. And when a buyer's agent has taken the time and energy to come show your house, I personally am greatly appreciative that they've done that. And I want to reward that by being responsive to them, by answering their questions. Now, let me just be upfront. I can't always pick up the phone that very moment they call because I may be on an appointment or in another commitment, but it's imperative that I get back to them very quickly. And I answer all questions, not just the ones by the agents, but let's say that there's an unrepresented buyer. The better I'm communicating that house and answering those questions to that particular interested party, the greater chance that both parties are going to win in a transaction. And I feel like it's a bit of a lost art because we're relying on texting and not talking on the phone. But come middle of August, when the rules change, being able to communicate effectively is going to be a prerequisite, a requirement, and a survival skill. So turn it over to you guys. What do you think about the communication facet?
Oh, 100%. And I'm going to give you an example of a situation where communication from the buyer's agent to me as the listing agent won her clients the listing. So I had put a home on the market and I had 2 offers. There were multiple offers at the time. But even prior to the offer, see, I'm going to take it a little further back, not just waiting for the offer, but when you're interested in a home or your client is interested in a home, why not, as a buyer's agent, call up and have a conversation with the selling agent? And she called me up and said, these buyers, they've never owned a home before. They came from another country and they really wanted to have the American dream of owning their first home. And that meant a lot to me. So when the offer came in, I had their offer. And then with very little down, very little down. And I will say this, it was an FHA loan. So it wasn't financially, it wasn't the strongest offer. The other offer was actually for a little less money, but they were putting a substantial amount down, and it was a regular 80% finance, 20% conventional loan. I then, because of the conversation we had, I called the mortgage broker for the buyers that really, really wanted the home, because she told me that once they saw it too. And I went and I met him at Starbucks. We sat for a half hour and I asked him questions. I said, can these people close on the home? And what happens if it doesn't appraise and there are a few $1,000s in between? Are they able to come up with the difference? Now, whether we would have ended up, meeting somewhere in the middle, or the seller would have dropped price or whatever, didn't matter. That wasn't part of the conversation. Part of the conversation was, can they come up with a difference? I wanted to know if they were financially strong enough. But I did that because of that conversation, of her picking up the phone. And then I asked the two agents to give me your highest and best offer. And I got, better offers from each of them. And when I discussed it with the seller, and I told him the story too, he agreed to sell it to this couple that really wanted it. And I cannot tell you, and all of you out there, how happy. To the other people, it was just a home. To these people, it was the home. And they were so happy that they and their agent gave me a video testimonial. They were that happy. Gave me, the other agent, the testimonial. So communication, you're right. It's so important. And it can sometimes clinch the deal.
Yeah. I'm going to jump in for just a second. Angie gave us the 5-minute warning about 3 minutes ago. So,
okay, that's good.
But a really great example we had here with one of the agents on our team during COVID had a very, very similar situation. Not the best offer in comparison to conventional and cash offers and all the kind of stuff that was going on. But Burke actually took the time to take the offer personally, show up at the listing agent's office with the offer in hand, and take the time to explain exactly what the offer was, make sure that any questions that they had about any of the detail or nuance of that offer was explained, made sure that they had all the answers so that they could speak directly to the seller and understand exactly what they were presenting. I think there were 6 offers on the table. He actually ended up winning, his clients, I should say, actually ended up winning the opportunity. And the agent on the other side said the same thing that you did. They went to their seller and said, hey, we have all these offers. They all basically look the same, only small, minor details. However, this buyer has proven, and so has their agent, that they're the ones that are most likely to make it to the closing table. They're willing to do what's like, I have one right now where the buyer came in, a VA buyer. I have a house that's going to struggle to go VA. And the buyer said, hey, whatever it takes to get to the closing table, we're going to be willing to come and help with paint. We're going to, we know that there will be some issues that we'll have to get over, but because their agent made the phone call and explained that I have a buyer that's willing to do that, the seller was willing to look at a VA offer, where oftentimes, they look at the offers based on what the challenges are that we're going to have to get over, and make a decision to go with the easier offer to get to the table with. So,
yeah, I'd like to add one thing to all of this. One thing, so communication is really great and it's really, really important. But one thing we as agents, and also you as consumers, buyers and sellers, have to be really careful of is to not say or do anything that could violate fair housing laws. And one of the things that could potentially be a problem are what are called buyer love letters. When a buyer writes a letter and then their agent wants them to present it to the seller. And I've actually told sellers, no, we're not going to look at it. And I've told the buyer's agents, because I remember one time in particular that it was a letter that came in, and it started talking about things that could allude to religion. And that cannot play into the decision. So anything that could be a violation of fair housing, we cannot consider at all. It's a business transaction, pure and simple. It's the numbers, it's who's going to come to the closing table, and a couple other factors. But so I would caution any buyer agents and those of you that are looking to buy from writing these buyer love letters, and I would caution the sellers not to look at them. Would you guys agree with that?
Yes, 100%. It's especially during COVID, it became a real issue. I know in our market, I'm assuming in yours as well, because it was so competitive for buyers and everything that they could think of to bring to the table to try to get somebody to accept their offer over somebody else's were being done. And I had the same challenges, that people would write things down and want us to present information that would have been clearly a fair housing violation. And completely understand the desire to try to humanize yourself, but there are ways to humanize yourself, and that's your agent's responsibility. My job, if I'm represented a buyer, or honestly, or a seller, when you come to see a home that we have listed, we get permission from our seller to share personal information about what they're doing, why they're selling, where they're going, so that we can allow the buyer that's buying the home to know that they're not selling the house because it's falling down around their ears, or the next door neighbor's a horrible person and they try to move away from, whatever the case might be. So there's a balance to that. And again, this is the nuance of real estate that I think oftentimes people don't understand. They don't know that these things are going on in the background, and how important it is, and how, honestly, how well they may be being represented, or how poorly that they may be being represented as the buyer or the seller, because they don't necessarily always see the communication that's going on in the background between the agents.
Right. Speaking of background, we all know, and we're telling you that Sean's office manager, Angie, is in the background for us. She's kind of keeping an eye on things and keeping an eye on the timing. So I'd like to wrap it up and say that, first of all, this conversation is not in any way intended to be a criticism or knock specifically on agents, but it's more intended for you to understand the things that you need to look out for when you're buying or selling a home. That being said, we thank you for joining us today. And our next episode, next week, instead of Tuesday, will be on Thursday, June 6th. And our topic will be, what should sellers do to best show off their homes for the sale? And with that, on behalf of Sean and Tripp, myself, we thank you, and we'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone.